morning, everybody, and welcome to TLC Live, and welcome to Orlando Sanchez back in Houston.
Yeah, it looks like she's going to make margaritas because she looks like a lime today.
A summertime. This is
No,
the
I
colors
know.
that is in fashion.
Really?
You need to be more trendy.
What's wrong with this outfit?
Well,
Meh.
boring.
Yeah.
Boring,
Well, it's
but
good to be back.
it's good to be back.
I
Yeah.
left 72-degree weather, 40% humidity, and got off of the airplane in Austin, Texas, and it was over 100 degrees last
Okay,
night.
actually, why you came back?
Exactly. I had to see you, and my friends say, "Why are you leaving? Why?" I said, "Well, I have a state to save. The state of Texas. So we've got to
Exactly.
get back and get to work. I know it's summertime and people are on vacation. Those of you that can't afford a vacation, because the economy is really taking a nosedive, and there's many indicators of that. Unfortunately, it is hurting working families, and so that's, I think, what we're going to spend most of the day talking about today is the economy and the impact it's having on working Americans.
Yeah, and for the first time, yesterday I went to fill up gas my car, and it dropped $8 because I was paying almost 102, 103, and I pay less than 100. So I don't know if that's good news or not. I mean, what is going on in the gas prices with the oil and gas and the economy? That's why we invite today Professor Julian Cardenas Garcia. He is the research assistant professor at the University of Houston.
In the Department of Economics?
Economics.
Okay, good. Well, Professor, it's great to have you back. I hope that you're staying cool today, and I'm glad to see somebody from my alma mater on the program today.
Hi, Orlando. Hi, Andrea. Thank you for inviting me.
You bet. Well, let's start off. I wanted to start the show off because driving over here this morning, I wanted to explain to our viewers that we're as close to a free market economy in this country as we can conceive of, right? Because anytime you create a government, you then start to create not only regulations for society, but you start regulating the market, right? And so regulations tend to have an impact on the markets. But essentially, Professor, in our system of economics in the United States, it is the price is basically a result of supply and demand. Is that essentially a basic truth in economics?
Well, supply and demand and as speculation as well. We have the price of the commodity that then we use for refined products. So crude oil it relies on supply, yeah, and demand forces in the market at the international level. So we have a reality inside the United States that it is different even from countries in Latin America, in Europe, or in Asia. So even though there's an international price for oil, then we have internal realities by nation and then affect the price of oil.
Yeah.
So again, prices that we have here in the United States, even though if they are very high compared with the last decade, are not as bad as the prices in general in Europe or even in Caribbean islands these days, right? So of course there are drivers at the international uh, price for oil market that then may be very sensitive to subtle reactions or forecasts that may happen with regard to the U.S. potential economic recession or the other countries that can fall into a recession in 2023, that actually those fears have been the drivers in yesterday and today's oil prices that had plumbed $15. We had seen yesterday a decrease of $9 in the WTI, the Western Intermediate Texas price here in the US. And today there was another fall of $5. So we will see that probably reflected in the gas station in the next 2 weeks. So we may see changes in the prices of gasoline. But again, also, we may expect that we will have a rebound of these prices as policies in Europe and in the United States go ahead. Huh?
Yeah, and but again, I wanted to explain to our viewers that, in other words, crude that you're talking about, and you referred to WTI, but then you have different types of crude, North Sea crude and whatnot. But anyway, crude, which is the initial product for the refinement of gasoline, is like, let's say, rice or sugar or wheat. It's a commodity. It's traded, and yes, there's speculation even in the agricultural industry. But my point is that government decisions about that industry have an impact. And
Absolutely.
in previous administrations, when they limited supply by, let's say, for example, shutting down the Keystone Pipeline or allowing the market to make decisions about how to bring products to the refineries, that eventually does have an impact on price. Yes or no? Because as the supply is diminished, and there is a rebound from COVID, and so consumption goes up, then it has a stress factor, right? You have a diminished supply, but you have a greater demand. And essentially, I see that as being a driving factor to the point, for example, I was at my home the other day and bought 5 gallons of gasoline. It cost me almost $30 to fill my lawnmower up. I mean, that's just ridiculous, and it affects people's lives. So is that essentially a true statement that by the government policies limiting supply, you do have an effect on the price?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, Orlando, at the national level, what happened, remember 2021? 2021 is way different in terms of the market and the relation of the Biden's administration with the oil sector. In 2021, even we may say that the oil industry was demonized, was left behind in many of the statement policies and interests of this administration, probably selling the idea of a transition in the energy mix too soon, actually, to what reality shows and data shows that we still are a global economy that relies heavily on hydrocarbons, basically oil, gas, and even carbon in many developing countries. So jumping too early in that belief will cost money to U.S. citizens, and we are seeing that in different states in the U.S. That are planning to transition probably in a time frame that is too short compared with what reality and the needs of energy security of the U.S. population. So, of course, some of the policies that you said, canceling the Keystone Pipeline or not providing support to the oil industry and reducing the even access to funding by multilateral funds or international financial banking that have limited funds for upstream projects, even outside the United States, Orlando, you had a report from the International Energy Agency almost saying that no more investments in exploration and production was needed in 2021, and they had to change that statement in just 2 weeks after. So, of course, we have seen the construction of a narrative that then it fell in 2022 when we see reality and we see right now how important is energy security, not only for the United States, but now for Europe, and how Europe was trading their energy security buying cheap Russian gas, but now a Russian gas that is causing a lot of trouble in Europe with the invasion of a sovereign nation, and how they are taking steps back, trying to separate their energy policies and their interdependency with Russia. So definitely, government decisions are all over the place in the oil industry. This is why OPEC also, under quotas, has an impact in international oil prices.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because it reminds me of the 1970s, when the Jimmy Carter administration and our reliance on OPEC. It seems to me that Europe is making the same mistake we did in the 70s when we were almost totally dependent on OPEC oil. And you look like you're very young, Professor, but I remember in the 70s, the lines were hours long to buy gasoline, and there was such a shortage of gasoline and the prices spiked so high that they went to the odd even number. So if your license plate ended in an even number, you could only purchase gasoline on certain dates. And if it was on an odd number, then you purchased gasoline on a different day of the week. We've never experienced, short of the Second World War, those sort of commodity scarcities in the United States. And it seems to me that it took us from the 70s to realize that we shouldn't have an overdependence on OPEC and Middle East oil, which, by the way, filled their coffers full of money. And, that money led to a lot of funding of terrorist activities around the globe. I think Europe has made the same mistake, and it's sad to see that we in the United States are being led by other Western countries in Europe and trying to, I was real happy yesterday to read in The Hill that it had a headline says that the new Green Deal was dead. And it seemed to me that new Green Deal was a unmitigated disaster for the global energy and the American energy markets.
As I was saying before, that was a jump and a bet that was made too early. And we have seen Germany fall into that mistake, for example, after the Fukushima accident, shutting down their nuclear plants and then having to restart carbon plan for the generation of electricity because they didn't have they have a scarcity in power in the country. We have seen that now. Gas had been probably what you saw on the Hill is that new regulation that include natural gas as part of the initiative for clean type of energy, which of course has way less emissions and probably in this energy mix transition, natural gas and liquefied natural gas will be the winners. It has the potential of creating a new global market for natural gas. So of course, we should recall that natural gas production in the U.S. and the development of liquefied natural gas is also the consequence of the breakthrough technologies developed in the U.S. like horizontal drilling or hydraulic fracturing, that in which the United States is a powerhouse. So hydraulic fracturing also was created and was implemented as part of a policy to create more access to natural gas, which is cleaner than crude oil. And we can diversify the type of consumption that we do from these two energy sources. So it was, demonizing hydrocarbons as a whole package and not seeing the difference between crude oil and gas was, misleading as it best.
And I'm glad you bring that up, and I'm going to give Andrea a chance to jump in here. But let me say, I look at the far left, and I don't blame, the Republican Democrat. I don't want to get into that. But there are extremists in both parties. But with respect to the Democrats, this whole, like you say, off the cliff movement towards, zero carbon emissions, that's great. I'm an environmentalist. I don't want to pollute our water and our atmosphere. But their idea is that, no, we don't want fossil fuels. We don't want crude. We don't want natural gas. Oh, and by the way, we had a nuclear disaster, 3 Mile Island, years and years ago. So we never really developed the cleanest form of energy, which is nuclear. And then we had, as you said, the incident in Japan. But you can never keep these crazy environmentalists happy. And so they thought that wind power was great. So Texas, of course, took itself advantage of the subsidies, and we developed this, wind resources out in West Texas, which became probably, 7, 8, 9% of our power generation. But look what happened during the freeze. The wind turbines stopped. And so that kind of created, not only were the wind turbines not providing electricity, but then the freeze also affected the pipelines, and then it just became an unmitigated disaster. So I agree with you 100%. We've got to use We probably ought to diminish our reliance on coal. We all agree it provides a substantial amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, but we do have technologies that have cleaner coal. I think natural gas for gas-fired turbines is a good idea. But I don't know why this country doesn't employ a policy of developing nuclear power plants. I mean, we've stopped permitting power plants. We stopped permitting, refineries. We closed down the Keystone Pipeline. Any goof would understand that's going to drive prices up.
Yeah,
Uh,
this is why, Orlando, I'm speaking to you from the Environment, Energy, and Natural Resources Center from the University of Houston. So we always mix the protection of the environment, but the needs that we have for energy. So we cannot separate those two concepts. But the only thing is we have an obligation to do it in an efficient way, feasible type of policies and technology, because we need to. I mean, it's hard to try to find that balance. It will be hard to any society, to any country in the world. The dangerous thing is to create narratives that separate, because of politics, that fall into misleading readings of data, and
What
needs.
100% agree with you, and I'm glad that you pointed out how the narrative has vilified the energy industry. That I mean, everybody thinks Exxon and Chevron and Shell and BP, they're all the demons, right? And that they make this excess of money. Well, they don't realize that, these corporations are owned, they're publicly traded company. They're owned by you and me and 401ks and institutions that invest money. And so the money, the profits they make come back to us. And so yeah, I agree 100%. And I'm glad
Well,
that the
Orlando,
university, at least you
yeah,
recognize that the vilification of the industry is not good for the
no,
consumer.
it's not the way to go. And Orlando, I didn't leave, of course, the embargo, the oil embargo from 1973. But you know what I leave were the lines in gasoline stations in Venezuela, when you have excessive control of the state over a national oil company, and that also created scarcity.
Professor, I wanted you to talk about the plan of the President Biden to stop for 3 months or to give us a break for 3 months of the tax on the gas. Is that something that we should celebrate, or what is going to be the impact after that? Because sometimes, we say, okay, free money. People don't understand the impact in the long term of what the government said is a free money, or we're going to cut the taxes on the gas to give people a break. But in the long term, what is the impact for everybody in the economy?
Well, that is part, Andrea, of a package of measures that the administration has been taking, right? Number one, I think we mentioned that one in the first, interaction that we had in March, um, was the use of the strategic reserves, 180 million of barrels for 6 months. So using 1 million of barrels of oil a day taken from the strategic reserve, and a strategic reserve that is there for situation of war and conflict. So was used at this time. Then we have the interaction that the Biden administration is trying to get with oil companies. The Biden administration sent a letter to the biggest refiners here in the U.S. in order to have a meeting and a dialogue. Sadly, that started with blaming the oil companies of the situation in prices, which are multi-factors that relies on inflation, the devaluation of the U.S. dollar, or the evaluation of the currency, international prices of crude oil. So I think it was not a moment to blame on the companies, but actually to coordinate and cooperate with the companies on how to handle the situation in the United States, even though they are asking for more capacity, production capacity, but the refining industry in the U.S., it was operating at 95%, and it's not safety just to go above that level. What it was required is more investment that were not made during the global pandemic, because demand was down during the last 2 years. So then we had other two more measures. One came from the IRS that has increased the amount of gas consumption that taxpayers can present when they present their declarations to the IRS. So that will provide also some help to the U.S. citizens and residents in this country. And finally, yes, it came with the idea of a suspension of the federal tax that represent about 18 cents a gallon, um, which then can be added to some tax holidays that were approved in other states like Connecticut or in Florida will be soon be implemented. So you can have a state tax and federal tax being reduced. The only thing is that federal tax holiday will have an impact in the infrastructure plan that was approved. So at the end of the day, we'll, we will pay it. We will have to pay, and we'll continue with some sort of subsidies that have been implemented during COVID. So we're implementing more subsidy that we will pay later on. I think that for 18 cents a gallon, some people may appreciate that. I'm sure, even more if that is added to some suspension in state taxes. But what happens is that probably with the drop of oil prices that we had yesterday and today, we will see a drop that will be higher than taking that decision. Probably this is not a battle that was necessary to peak. Probably President Biden had to select and pick its own battles, right? I don't know if this was made just to create a false dilemma in Congress, putting the two main parties in the U.S. Congress to deliberate and to decide and take position on this tax, since for 3 months and that amount of 18 cents per gallon will be probably not that critical when we see the prices that we have today.
Professor, I'm not an economist, and I'm always fascinated by my friends that majored in economics. I'm a political science major, but I'll tell you my opinion is that there is some danger in this administration. Of course, they've made a whole series of mistakes, and this is just another one. As you mentioned, there may be a suspension, or there is a suspension of the federal taxes on fuel. So let's say there's a reduction of 18 cents per gallon. At some point, because as you correctly point out, that money represents highway money for the continued development of the infrastructure. So not only is he not going to be able to fulfill part of his promise of Build Back Better, right? Because that's what he promised the American people. We were going to focus on infrastructure, highways and bridges, and the maintenance and the deferred maintenance that we have in this country that relies on that federal gas tax. He's also going to have to, at some point, raise gas prices back up and reinstate the tax, and that's going to be dangerous politically, because as people are starting to enjoy not only a drop in the supply of the cost of crude, then Biden comes in as prices are dropped and says, "Oh, I'm going to reinstitute the gas, so I'm going to raise gas prices back up 18 cents." That's really dangerous in an election year. That's probably not going to be very good for the Democrats.
Yeah, Orlando, for me, introducing that false dilemma or controversy to Congress, I'm not sure how effective that will be or how beneficial that can be if we have in front of us in November the elections, right? So probably there are measures that the United States can take, and of course is to realize how important is its own energy security, how important is to support one of the key sectors in the U.S. economy that is the energy sector, and to confirm that, and I mean, this administration has to realize that it has to be if one of their allies in all this global context. It's not, they don't have to play against them.
I agree.
Professor Cardenas, tell us about the news, the breaking news today, and the impact on that on the OPEC Secretary General died. You were before we start the show. You tell us the news, and I didn't know. I was just searching out. So tell us about it and the impact that it's gonna have on this.
Yes, we woke up today with the news that Mohamed Barkindo passed yesterday, and the news was spread in the media. Mohamed Barkindo visited the United States several times, and Houston, particularly, probably in the most recent Sierra Week conferences that were hosted here in downtown Houston. So it was a secretary from the General of OPEC from Nigeria that has close ties with the United States and understood the importance of the dialogue between the OPEC and U.S. private actors and the U.S. government. So already in January, the organization have selected a successor, Hatam Al Gais from Kuwait, a 33 years veteran in the oil industry, a former governor of Kuwait, OPEC, that will be taking the office, taking the position of Secretary General of OPEC in August. So the organization was prepared for that transition, and not, of course, under these circumstances. And the upcoming new Secretary General has already made statements to emphasize the important role of OPEC and its non-OPEC allies that they have today, such as Russia, in order to balance the international market and reach a price and stability that they look for, which is OPEC has not been able to provide such an stability as interventor in the market. But without that, is one important player having 33% of global production of oil. And if we add the production of Russia, they may get to close to 40 or even about 40% of the global production of oil.
Professor, you mentioned at the top of the program that the price of that we pay at the pump is a result of global markets and global narratives, and we are in a global economy. There's no denying that. Recognizing that fact, there are key players in the energy sector. Not only is the United States a key player, as are the British, and then, of course, the Middle Eastern countries and Russia. But there are also in our hemisphere other key players that, if their politics were good, they could be contributing to exploration and production, which would increase supply and diminish prices. The three that I'm going to refer to are PDVSA, Petrobras, and Pemex. All of those, because of their political decisions, have become pretty much a disaster. If you look at Venezuela, who sits on an abundance of natural resources, their energy industry, because of policies, is a disaster. Petrobras has gone through a turbulent period, and now with AMLO being elected in Mexico, we have Pemex that's being used to support the sort of socialist policies of AMLO, and again, they're not making the investment necessary to keep their industry up. What's the future of those three, Petrobras, Pemex, and PDVSA?
Such a complex and sometimes frustrating topic, Orlando, since you saw last month during the celebration of the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles, that the Biden administration decided not to invite the presidents or the regimes of Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba to that meeting. López Obrador, the president of Mexico, decided not to come to that summit. That was a message that was unprecedented. That type of decision not to participate in a meeting organized by probably the most important economic and political partner of Mexico, which is the United States of America. So that gives you an idea of what is going on. Mexico is trying to, the AMLO's administration already realized that their energy policy has failed in the last 3 years. That idea of suspension of bid rounds is not, it reduced the dynamism that the sector had in the previous year after the energy reform in 2013. So we haven't seen the country of that is prepared to provide more supply to the U.S. In the other hand, Venezuela is also sunk in that situation that um, under sanctions and the Maduro's regime does not agree yet to run new elections to legitimize the recognition of the Venezuelan government. Also in the news was a few days ago the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nicolas Maduro in a tour in Europe and in the Middle East. They made statements in support of Russia with regard to the special operation they said in Ukraine. So buying Russia's narrative in the war in Ukraine. So it's not Venezuela doesn't seem that country that may be prepared to provide in the short term a solution for oil supply in the U.S. Again, it's a country that has the vast, probably the biggest oil reserves in the world. However, the problems are in the surface, not under the ground in that country. And then Brazil is coming to elections in the fall. And we will see what will be that path. Currently, Brazil is the number one producer of oil in the U.S., but it's not a net exporter. It's such a big country with a huge economy that they consume most of the oil that they produce. So they need oil. What we have is Guyana, that probably in the medium term will be a more reliant supplier to the U.S. if the conditions on the terms of the investments that have been made in Guyana are respect. Um, but again, there's a lot of potential also inside the United States. Still, there is areas for production and exploration and for lease in the United States where the U.S. can find its own solutions and path, even though the region is so complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Professor, delighted to have you again on the program. It's absolutely a fascinating discussion, and we could have discuss more topics for another half hour, but I know that your time is limited, our time is limited. But we thank you for the insights. We thank the University of Houston for making you available to our program and all the good research and good work that you're doing over there at the university. So, muchas gracias. Un placer
Gracias,
tenerlo otra
Orlando.
vez en el
Gracias,
programa.
Andrea.
Muchísimas gracias por tu tiempo. Gracias.
Saludos.
Wow.
Excellent. And
Incredible.
this is the great work that the University of Houston is doing, not only in moving into the medical field, but also in the economy and public policy, and in
Yeah.
architecture, and in law, and in the arts. Not only do we have the Moore School of Music, and just
I know.
I'm so proud of the University of Houston and how
Me
far
too.
we've come.
Me too. Living in Houston and having two kids about to go to college, I mean, sometimes we don't consider it our own things.
Right.
And definitely University of Houston. And I know so many people, great professionals, and we've been interviewing them here or having them in the show, and they study at the University of Houston. So that's something to go. Exactly. As an example is at home.
They produce excellent products.
Exactly.
Go Cougs. All right.
Local products.
Anyway, I wanted to touch a little bit on immigration again.
We need to go back to the topic, yes.
And we don't have a guest on immigration, but, we at Texas Latino Conservatives tend to analyze a lot of public policy. And over the years, we've looked at the discussion about immigration in this country. And it's, unfortunately, a failure. The immigration
Big failure, and we're seeing people dying. And we're seeing everything get hurt out of that. I mean, we're still talking about the 53 immigrants that died last week, and the bodies haven't been released yet because medical examiners are still having the bodies doing the autopsy.
Well, many Texans don't realize, because, again, as the professor says, it's all about the narrative in the media, right? So when there's 53 bodies found in a boxcar in San Antonio, all of the national media runs out there to cover the story. But people don't realize, Andrea, because, I'm a property taxpayer. I have a house along the border.
Yeah.
We see this every day. They're not 53. But we have bodies in the desert, in the Chihuahua Desert, because I have a place in Kinney County, Texas, and our neighbor is the state of Coahuila, Mexico. And to get from that portion of Mexico, it's known as the Del Rio sector, which is the busiest sector and the one that's crossed the most. It's been in the news quite a bit, Del Rio has. But to cross the river there, you have to trek through the Chihuahua Desert. It's a massive desert in the southwest. We have bodies all the time. In fact, CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, spends most of their time offering first aid to immigrants rather than, interdicting the crossing. And so the media fails to recognize the number of bodies that we found in the desert, many of whom are coming across with fake identification.
Of course.
And then, so we don't know who these bodies, are. And in fact, a lot of people don't know, but Texas State University has a repository of bones of human remains that are still unidentified that they find in the desert. And they work hard to repatriate those remains. But that's the sad story is, yes, there were 53 people last week in San Antonio. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, in the desert that are found
Then nobody talks
over
about
the year
it.
that no one talks about. And so the tragedy is that, I've thought long and hard about this. And this reminds me of 1939 and 1945, when the Axis, Hitler, and Germany were using human beings for labor and packing them in boxcars and transporting them to concentration camps to provide labor for the war machine of the Nazis. The United States government knows that we are now reliant on cheap labor. And since 1986, we've done nothing to change our immigration laws. This administration has completely ignored what's going on in the border. And I'm not blaming just the Democrats because now they're in charge, because both parties have been in the majority and both have had an opportunity to make a decision. But unfortunately, our politics today is too much partisanship and not so much about worrying about the American taxpayer and the safety of those people coming over. I've said this before because I'm an immigrant. I had to leave my country because of communism. I was 3 years old. My parents made the decision to leave Cuba, to go to Venezuela, and then emigrate to the United States. I benefited from a policy of the Democrats that any Cuban that applied for residency got a green card. I'm very thankful for that. And I thank the Democrats in 1962 for allowing me to be here. But, every country has a right to choose the quality, the caliber, and the quantity of people emigrating into a country. The United States, the people of the United States have a right to do that. We also have a right to secure our border. And our government, especially the U.S. Congress, has a duty to the American people to address the holes, the issues, the failures of the immigration policy. We haven't done that. And so I'm urging our members of Congress and our senators, our House of Representatives and our senators, which is the U.S. Congress, to address the issues that are impacting not only the local taxpayer, because, for example, here in Texas, we have to provide for schooling for the undocumented children. We have to provide social services for the undocumented. We have to provide health care for the undocumented. And, of course, who's benefiting are the people that are hiring the undocumented alien because they're paying cheap prices. And so that's got to stop. That has to stop. We can stop illegal immigration tomorrow by having domestic enforcement, by finding and arresting those that hire the undocumented worker. If we don't, we're part and parcel, we're a co-conspirator in the importation of not only forced labor. I know we pay these people, but we don't pay them enough. And yesterday, as I arrived to the Austin airport, I'm in an elevator, and if we can put the picture up, I see this picture, and it is absolutely spot on. This is a human crisis. This is at the airport in Austin, Texas, in an elevator. It's modern-day slavery. And it's sad to me that in 2022, the United States government, through the U.S. Congress, which makes our laws and can amend our immigration policies, is allowing this to happen. People are dying. The taxpayers are being fleeced. And anytime you put people in boxcars, whether it's on rail or whether it's in 18-wheelers or whether it's in tanker trailer or in the trunk of an automobile, this is the importation of slavery, of drugs, of sex, and it's got to stop. The U.S. Congress knows it's going on because every congressman loves to come to the border during the election time because they're tough on the border.
Yeah.
But where are they now? It's time that Congress acts.
And they haven't visited the border.
No, not now.
They went to El Paso.
But they'll show up closer to election day. Yeah, but then it's over. And so, it's time that we address this issue, not only for the sake of the taxpayer of the United States, and particularly those of us in Texas, because we have the largest border with Mexico. We bear the brunt in Texas of illegal immigration. Our taxpayers, because everything is supported by property taxes in the state of Texas, we're being fleeced, and Congress has to step up. The governor and the lieutenant governor and our state legislature are spending millions of dollars along the border. And this is a responsibility, a sole responsibility based on U.S. Supreme Court decisions of the United States federal government. States do not have a right to have an effect on immigration law. All we can do is try to protect ourselves, but it's not working. We need the federal government to step in. We need Congress to do its job and to seriously look at immigration reform, not from a partisan perspective, but from a perspective of saving human lives and working for the American taxpayer. And so that's my comment. And Andrea, I'll toss it back to you.
No, that's it. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for watching us. Next week, I'm going to find a guest for you, a host.
Where are you going to be?
I'm going to be in Spain.
Spain.
I'm going to be in España. Voy a estar en España.
It must be nice.
It will be nice, yeah. I'm going to be with my family over there. My brother lives there, so
okay.
I'm going to be for 2 weeks, so I'm going to find somebody to...
Yeah, we'll have a guest host, and if you would like to be in Andrea's chair, you can always log on to TLC. TexasLatinoConservatives.com. TexasLatinoConservatives.com. Send us your resume or find us on Facebook. Send us if you want to fill in for Andrea, I'm happy to have a guest host.
It has to be a female. And you have a couple of requests, but that's going to be...
Well, it'll be hard to fill your shoes, Andrea, but we'll manage.
Thank you so much, Orlando.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Andrea will... Be nice if you joined us from Spain, but we're not going to make you work.
No, please.
Okay.
Give me a little bit of a break.
All right, guys. Again, we are dependent on donations by the public to keep Texas Latino Conservatives on the air and active in the state of Texas. As you know, we've had tremendous successes. We've elected young Hispanics that are conservatives across the state of Texas, whether it's Midland or whether it's Kerrville or whether it's Longview or whether it's Alvin, Texas, and we're going to have an impact in Harris County. We're starting to have a larger presence in Dallas. And so there'll be more announcements about that. But I would also invite you to check out our op-ed in the Dallas Express this week. It's the Dallas Express News. It's a newspaper, online newspaper that gets tremendous circulation in the Metroplex. Go check out the article, the opinion that I published in that. We also remind you that Mayra Flores, our most recent conservative Latina elected in a Democrat district, which is 84% Hispanic, was a graduate of Leadership Latino.
Correct. And we have 2 classes of Leadership Latino coming up in August. So check our website, TexasLatinoConservatives.com, and you're going to see on the top Leadership Latino. Just click over there, register. It's at no cost. And please join us because that's going to make a big difference, whether you want to run for office or you just want to be a leader in your community or just want to get skills to speak in public, whatever is your desire, but that's going to be a big change in your career. We need to have that kind of skills for everything that we do in life.
Yeah, as we say, we recognize the exploding population of the Latinos in the state of Texas, the Hispanics, and I've always said that if we really started voting our values, we would save the state of Texas, and that's coming to fruition. So if you're young and you're conservative and you love this country and you're a patriot, regardless of whether you're an immigrant or not, I'm an immigrant, Mayra Flores is an immigrant, Andrea's an immigrant, we're all immigrants to this country, but I can tell you that we're equally as patriotic as a native-born American. We love this country. We owe everything that we have to this country. We want to fight just as hard as native-borns to keep our Constitution alive, to keep our free markets alive. But to do that, we've got to be in the fight. And that's what TLC is. We're in the fight. We're finding young conservative leaders that will be the leaders of tomorrow in the state of Texas. Help us out. Make a donation to Texas Latino Conservatives through our website, texaslatinoconservatives.com. We'll see you guys next week.
Nos vemos pronto. Chao, chao. Gracias. Let's see.